Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and talk about the events in the world of Scientology as reported on Tony's Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me.
As always, good times and pretty interesting weeks. Definitely some noteworthy things to discuss, starting with, and some stuff that I thought is picking up steam, maybe. We certainly keep hearing on a weekly basis from Alex over in the UK. And now we have more coming, more controversy from the East Grinstead City Council, or what's going on now?
Yeah, a couple of things happened last week that were a lot of fun. Alex alerted me that the East Grinstead Town Council, which is like the city council of that town where Scientology has its UK headquarters, was having a Zoom online meeting, and that anybody can listen in as long as you request a link. And so because he gave me a notice, I emailed them. They sent me a link. So I was watching as four members of the public spoke up during the public question period and asked about Scientology. And they were good questions, very pointed questions, especially for the mayor, who's been so chummy with Scientology there. And he just did his best to dismiss it. And yeah, this is not the right forum. You should be telling police, not telling us. Very frustrating. But then what really surprised us was when the council then uploaded the meeting video to YouTube, they cut off the public questions.
Right.
And just kind of more evidence that they're just in Scientology's pocket. They don't want to hear any complaints. But I think Alex is doing a good job of raising some questions over there that have got people talking about things they don't normally talk about. So that was the first part of the week, and then later in the week, he and I did a story together. When he was getting ready for that protest in November at the IAS gala, we were hearing a lot of different things about whether, we knew that Alex had requested a road closure for a march, but we were hearing that Scientology had gotten it shut down. We weren't sure. Everything worked out great. Alex had a great protest, but he was savvy enough to, after the event, make a records request with the city and the district for emails between the politicians and Scientology, because of course those would be public. And he got a bunch of them and turned them over to me. And I put together a story showing that what was most interesting was that, like, within hours of Alex requesting a road closure with the Mid Sussex District Council, which is the next level up from East Grinstead, I guess it would be the equivalent of like a county board of supervisors here in the US.
Yeah.
When he contacted them and asked them for a road closure, explained the protest, within hours, one of the counselors, so sort of like a board of supervisor, county supervisor, had told the council that Scientology wanted the road shut down. And this politician had leaped into the breach for Scientology, and the workers there were kind of confused. They realized, wait a minute, he's asking for a road closure on the same road on the same day as this guy who wants it shut down for a protest. So it was really interesting to see the actual paperwork showing how a politician is so safe pointed by Scientology, so beholden to them, that he was doing what he could to get the road shut down for them.
Yeah.
And of course, the best thing was the name of this counselor from the Mid Sussex District Council is actually Dick Sweatman. That's
I know.
literally his name. We can't help laughing about it. We're all talking about it. But anyway, his
I,
name is Dick Sweatman.
I,
He's a former mayor of East Grinstead. So he's had interaction with Scientology for many years. And he actually presided over the opening of the new Narconon UK there. I mean, he's just so in the pocket of Scientology. And now we have some proof of that. So that was really interesting. And let me also mention that The Guardian this weekend did a very good piece about Narconon in the UK. And Alex was involved with that
yeah,
too.
that's
He had
right.
helped the journalists get that together. And it's a very good piece raising some serious questions about the lack of oversight of Narconon in the UK.
Yeah.
My only criticism of it, and it's kind of, and I don't want to criticize the writer. She did a great job. I'm sure it's her editors. My only criticism is with some of these legacy media, they have this attitude where when they do an investigation like that, they will pretend that they're the first people to ever explore this subject ever. And it's really a shame with this because they had this whole mealy mouth attitude to the story saying, well, we think here's some evidence that maybe Scientology is related to
Yes.
Narconon. I mean, it was a joke. It's like, it's so well established that Narconon is Scientology. And, for example, the best example, Luke Catton, former president of Narconon Arrowhead, the biggest Narconon in the world, went on NBC and explained how Narconon is just a branch of Scientology. You can pull
Exactly.
that video. You can show his quotes. And there's so much more evidence like that. And so there's just no excuse for the Guardian today to be saying, there's some evidence that there might be some links between Narconon. I mean, that's kind of a joke. But
Yeah.
other than that, great piece. And as Alex said, we've got Scientology on the front page in the UK. I think, what's Scientology is such a popular subject over here in the US, but I think in England, it's been a while since there's been this kind of attention paid to it. And it's really thanks to Alex Barnes Ross. The guy's on fire.
That's right. Absolutely. And I more power to him. And this was a good story. I completely agree with what you said. I was going to bring up the exact same thing because it really annoyed me because it is so understood. Every single Scientologist would tell you that in a heartbeat. They don't even like think about it as some weird thing that Narconon and Scientology are not the same thing. Of course they are. And just like all their other front groups, of which they have many, all with this express intention of infiltrating society with L. Ron Hubbard so that people are more amenable to the mainline Scientology messages and then get on board with that. That's what it's all about. They explained it all to us very carefully when we were Scientologists. This isn't some hidden thing.
Right.
Right. So that's very, very clear. And to see them, fudge about with that was rather silly. But all the other facts were absolutely spot on. And it needs to be said because I never get sick of saying this. Narconon is deadly. It is fatal. It is actually not just quacky pseudoscience that's kind of goofy. It can really hurt you
Yeah.
with what they do to people physically to detox their bodies with the whole sauna thing and all that. It's just utter crap. So anyway, I'm really glad this is getting some exposure over on the other side of the pond. Now there was this it's again sort of a case study this week of the tragic sadness of committed hardcore extreme Scientologists who, even when they get the short shrift from the church, it's still a tragedy. This was, in this case, Elisabeth Moss's father.
Yeah. Ron Moss. He
Yeah.
died. He died recently, a couple weeks ago or something. And I wasn't going to write anything about it. But then Jeff Levin came to me. Jeff Levin was this fixture at the Hollywood Celebrity Center. I know his name isn't. He's not a very famous guy, but he really was a fixture there. Very successful musician, often behind the scenes, a lot of TV shows and things. And so he knew all these people really well. He watched Elisabeth Moss grow up, and he wanted to tell me some things about his observations about Ron Moss. Meanwhile, Mike Rinder, Claire Headley, Mark Headley did a video explaining exactly what happened to Ron Moss and his daughter. And so I put those two together, and just to
Mm.
get a sense of what happened here, Ron Moss was a trombonist and a musical manager, and he worked very closely with Chick Corea. He was Chick Corea's manager. And then around the year 2001, Chick Corea had a big problem. He had financial problems. He had debts. And this could have been very bad for Scientology because, he was OT8. He was always kind of the most visible and vocal of the celebrities. He was ready to talk about Scientology in magazines and things like that. It would be very bad if it came out and it turns out that OT8 Chick Corea was broke. And so Mike said that David Miscavige's solution was Scientology would buy Chick's studio called Mad Hatter Studios in LA.
Yep.
And from those proceeds, Chick would be able to pay off his debts. And Mark chimed in because he said, yeah, ever after that, Mad Hatter was the biggest white elephant. It was such a joke. None of us had any, there was no reason for us to have this thing. It was clearly just charity for Chick Corea. They never really used that studio for anything good.
Right.
But the important thing is that not only was Chick bailed out by Scientology, but as Mike explained, they needed a who. In the Hubbard sense of the philosophy, you got to have a head on a pike. Somebody's got to be blamed. And they decided to blame Ron Moss, Chick's manager. And in order to do that, they had Marty Rathman run him through sec checking. I don't know if he ran the truth rundown on him or what. Sounds like it was the truth rundown. And eventually Ron admitted to, yeah, it's all my fault. And so they didn't, I don't know that they declared him. The way Mike described it was that he was told you can't have anything to do with Chick anymore, and you're not part of the celebrity crowd. And for the last 20 years, Ron Moss had basically been in this gray area limbo. And Mike explained that as time went on, they could never really destroy him because his daughter was becoming so famous and such a Scientology success story. And so, but Jeff Levin's part of it was yes, and part of all that was Elisabeth disconnected from him, disowned
Right.
him.
Wow.
And Mike found this remarkable video a couple years ago when Chick died. Ron Moss actually gave an interview to a music podcast and said, I just feel bad we never reconnected in the last 20 years. I never got to talk to him. So right there, he acknowledged that he spent 20 years being punished by Scientology, Chris. And here's the kicker. What Jeff Levin had found out was that Ron had moved to Clearwater, was at Flag, and was still trying to get back in the good graces and do his OT levels and someday hopefully make up the damage and get back to where he was. And that's the situation when he died.
Man. I mean, tragedy. Tragic. What else do you call that? I mean, to have judged your life at the end, to have been a failure because of that. You know what I mean? I mean, how awful. Disconnected from his daughter. I mean, all of it, all the elements. Anyway, and then
And there's a new Handmaid's Tale season coming, and we'll get another round of stories from people saying, "Isn't it odd that Elisabeth Moss, a Scientologist, is portraying somebody in this dystopian cult
yeah,
future or whatever?" And it's like, yeah, but you don't know the half of it. Not only is she a Scientologist, but she disconnected from her own dad.
yeah.
That's how hardcore she is.
It's 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 let me make it even weirder. Is is not only is she portraying a cult member in this thing, right? But in her mind, she's got it reversed to like the Matrix, where that's Scientology. Scientology is like this Matrix thing where they're the ones that engaging in the revolution against the oppressive thing. So no, she doesn't get it at all. She has it so reversed in her head. That's all cult members. I'm not just talking about her. So I can say that with some confidence, but it's just sad. Um, and and that's what Scientology is about. That's what these cults are about. Yeah, speaking of cults, and whoa, I've always been fascinated by this connection and this story. And we got more on this on your Substack this week. L. Ron Hubbard and Leni Riefenstahl. I mean, Mitch Brisker and I have talked about this. He's laid out, a lot of details about this because he was really fascinated by her. But what was the story this week?
Right. So a couple of years ago, I just had this incredible good luck, Chris. One of my readers had stumbled upon an actual copy of the screenplay that L. Ron Hubbard and Leni Riefenstahl wrote together in 1960. Now, this was something that was known, but very few things that I like. There was a single sentence in a New Yorker story, in a really great biography of Leni. There's like a paragraph. Um, Leni's own memoirs, she goes into it in some detail, but there were still lots of missing stuff. Like, how the heck did they get together?
Mm-hmm.
And so once I got the screenplay, I really wanted to dig into that. And I for the Daily Beast 2 years ago, I did this investigation. I wrote that what happened was, Leni's famous, of course, because she was Adolf Hitler's favorite filmmaker. And in 1932, she had made this alpine fantasy sort of rock climbing film called The Blue Light, and it was very ahead of its time, amazing look to it. She was clearly a very talented filmmaker. The next year, Hitler came into power in 1933, and then he sought her out to help him with propaganda. And so then in 1934 or 5, I can't remember, they filmed the giant Nuremberg rally, and it became her film Triumph of the Will, which today you still see those shots. Whenever, anytime anybody, any film or documentary wants to evoke the Nazi movement, they always show clips from Lenny's film. It's so famous. And then she also filmed the Berlin 1936 Olympics. That became another film, Olympia, again, glorifying Hitler and Nazism. So then after the war, she was imprisoned, and she came out and she claimed that she was naive. She was never helping the Nazis. She was just a hired filmmaker. Lots of evidence was coming out, though, really bad evidence to the contrary against her. So throughout the years, she was always fighting this battle, trying to rescue her reputation. In 1960, this younger editor from Canada named Philip Hudsmith really, really liked her and her stuff, approached her, wanted to help her resurrect her career, and he suggested, let's go back to 1932 before any of this Nazi shit. We'll take that great rock climbing Alps adventure you did, the Blue Light, and remake it now. She loved the idea. And they signed Somerset Maugham, famous writer, to write the script. But then, she kept getting, newspapers and magazines kept hunting her down and asking her about Hitler. So Maugham didn't want anything to do with it. At that point, Hudsmith brought in Hubbard. And that was where I was trying to figure out why. Hubbard had not been in Hollywood for 25 years. And even then, he'd only done a single serial. He claimed to be a real big Hollywood guy, but he wasn't. He had almost no credits to his name. Why, in 1960, would Philip Hudsmith go from M. Somerset Maugham to L. Ron Hubbard? Well, I got a source in his family who then explained to me that he was a Dianeticist. He was an early Dianetics guy. He was a Scientologist. That's why Philip Hudsmith decided to bring together his two biggest heroes in the world, L. Ron Hubbard and Leni Riefenstahl. So,
missing link.
yes. And so in the summer of 1960, Hubbard was at St. Hill. Lenny moved into his apartment in London. They collaborated. They put together this script that all these years later, a reader of mine discovered in some archives, and I had. Well, then a couple years, right about that time, not too long after that, I first started hearing from Mitch Brisker. And Mitch is a really interesting figure because he was a filmmaker in Scientology. He came out. He reached out to me. We were talking. He wasn't public yet. We were still talking behind the scenes. And he said, "Listen, I really want to tell you, I like your Leni Riefenstahl story. I didn't think anybody else knew that story but me." He had some correspondence between the two of them. So he wanted me to wait a little bit, so we waited. But now he gave me this amazing 4-page letter written by L. Ron Hubbard after Philip Hudsmith first invited him to work with Lenny. And it's wonderful. You can tell Hubbard's so excited that somebody remembers he was in Hollywood and that he's going to talk about, the things about it and how disappointed he was in certain things. And, he's got ideas for this new film and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. It's hilarious. I mean, Hubbard is so excited. You can tell. And he's got some various ideas about, he's really into the idea of the sound being different and some new advances in stereo sound. He wants to put it anyway. Really fascinating. And then also, what Mitch also had for me was a 1979 but just real quick, the movie never got made. They did write a script together. It's very similar to the original film. I had a professional screenwriter, the guy who wrote The Game, Brancato, look at it, and he confirmed for me it's old-fashioned. It's not the way they were writing scripts in 1960. It's obsessed with camera angles rather than story, which when you're writing a screenplay, the number one thing you want to get right is get the story and the dialogue. Hubbard was obsessed with camera angles, right? It was kind of weird. And when Philip Hudsmith really wanted to get going, he had raised some money. He wanted to film. So he thought they needed to raise more money, but they needed some publicity. So he arranged for the first screening of Olympia, the Olympics film, in London that summer. And Lenny showed up, and it was a disaster. Like one of the journalists there was screaming at her, "Why didn't you kill Hitler?" Project dead. Okay, so it never happened. But I knew that Ron and Lenny had continued to correspond. Mitch actually had a letter from Lenny to Ron in 1979, almost 20 years later. Ron was in the desert in California making films, and he wanted to recreate an African village in the California desert.
That's right.
So he had written to Lenny asking her to send some of her photos because after she then became known in the 70s for she went to some really beautiful places in Africa and took some striking photography of people there. And Ron wanted some of those so that they could help him recreate it. And he wanted something from South Africa. And so she had written him and said, I've never been there. She had said that in her memoir that Ron was kind of obsessed with South Africa and she knew that she could never go there with her background because they would just equate her Nazi connections to the apartheid regime. She knew enough to stay away from South Africa. She was more interested in East Africa and Sudan. And so she said, sorry, Ron, I can't help you with that, but I can send you one of these other photos. So it was really interesting to see that they continued to correspond. Now, I know there's even more correspondence between the three of them, Ron, Lenny, and Philip Huntsmith. I'm hoping to get my hands on it. I haven't been able to, but this was just a taste of it. I just thought it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. What a little, like, it's a fisheye view into a side of this stuff and of Ron's Hubbard's life and behind the scenes stuff that you just, where else do you see this? I mean, this is just, it's just really colorful, fascinating backstory to the Scientology picture because you can connect certain dots here, like Hubbard's study of photography while he was at St. Hill and the obsession with the camera. Hubbard's obsession with Cecil Rhodes in South Africa and him thinking he was Cecil Rhodes, right? Without the gay part. And, blah, 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 right? So you just connect all these little dots in behind and it just paints a bigger picture of what this guy was all about. The human being, I guess you could say.
And, in 1960, if L. Ron Hubbard was willing to work with this person who was so associated with Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime, keep in mind that was right at the time he was most pushing the apartheid regime in South Africa. He was agitating for them. He was giving speeches on their behalf. I know people think Scientology, Florida, California, it's probably some hippie thing. L. Ron Hubbard was a classic mid-century reactionary. He was totally right-wing. And to this day, most Scientologists tend to be on the conservative side. Now, there are definitely liberal Scientologists. I'm not saying that there aren't, but Scientologists tend to be kind of Alex Jones style, right-leaning conspiracy folks, because that's what Hubbard was. And boy, 1960, he was agitating for this apartheid regime in South Africa and letting Lenny Riefenstahl stay in his apartment. I mean, this is like the right-wing Hall of Fame.
Well, growing up in Scientology, I can absolutely verify everything Tony just said. Confessions of a former ditto head. I mean, I was raised like kind of right-wingish conservative, listening to Rush Limbaugh while I was a staff member in Santa Barbara and like, yeah, this guy gets it, Oh, after I got out, I just couldn't even believe who I used to be. Okay, finally, we have some updates on Leah's lawsuit. And okay, so first off, there were some responses Scientology was a little upset about with Mark and Claire and Mike and Claire's affidavits.
Right. So in Leah's lawsuit, there are several different things going on. But and I was out in LA for a couple of hearings. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And kind of the surprising development that happened that week was that RTC, Leah is suing CSI, Church of Scientology International, and the Religious Technology Center, RTC, and David Miscavige. RTC wants out of the lawsuit because they're saying Leah's alleging that she's been stalked and harassed and intimidated, but she doesn't. RTC isn't described in any of that. RTC is not following her. RTC is not. Why are we even in this lawsuit? Well, the judge in that case, Judge Randolph Hammock, explained that at this early stage, all Leah needs to do is allege it. She'll have to prove it later, that's what a trial's for, is to prove to a jury that, yes, RTC and CSI are harassing her. But right now, in order to keep the lawsuit going, all she has to do is allege it. And RTC had pointed out that in the papers so far, the court papers, they really don't talk about RTC being behind these things. So the judge gave her a chance to make up for that and gave her an extra week. In that extra week, Mike Rinder and Claire Headley put together declarations, and they are fantastic. I published them in full at my website. They are a litany of how RTC and David Miscavige have to be in charge of all retaliation in the Church of Scientology. They saw it with their own eyes. Excellent, excellent. Exactly what the judge was saying Leah needs to do. Well, this week, Scientology got to respond. And, Chris, I have this theory that they're not just submitting a document to a court. They're writing for David Miscavige. There's just no question. When you see the language, that they always have to act so outraged and so, I can't believe somebody would say this about Scientology. There's an audience for that, and that's David Miscavige. So I always enjoy it. I just think it's hilarious. And so this time it was Matthew Hinks, the attorney for RTC, who responded to Mike and Claire's depositions. And you can take a look at some of the details. It's very funny how he calls them like, what's he call them? Religious bigots. I mean, all the predictable garbage. I think it's a bit of a mistake this time because Judge Hammock, has already shown himself to be, when I was there in the courtroom, he used the words common sense. And I was just like, wow, a judge talking about common sense? Because common sense will tell you that, yeah, Leah did it. Leah met her burden. She's, and then also what's also going to be happening, in a week later, they're going to be talking about, has she served David Miscavige properly? If Judge Hammock uses common sense then too, yes, he's been served. So I think they got a problem with this judge, and it'll be interesting to see this week how that turns out.
Big time. Absolutely it will. And I would love to see this judge. I would just love to see it, just because of course it's such the obvious elephant in the room, is to just look at David Miscavige's lawyer straight in the eye and just go, okay, so if he hasn't been served, why are you here?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the part that's so hard for some of my readers to understand, is that Jeffrey Riffer, David Miscavige's personal attorney, is submitting documents to the court saying, essentially, we don't know you're suing us because you haven't served us a lawsuit properly.
Right.
And everybody's like, yeah, but you must know, otherwise you wouldn't be submitting the document. And one of my Australian readers was pointed out saying, listen, if an attorney did that and came down to the court and said, sorry, you haven't served my client, they'd give it to him. And it's it's over.
Right.
Why can't they do that? So that's going to come up this week in the Jane Doe 1 lawsuit against David Miscavige and Gavin Potter. That's Tuesday. We will get a chance to see how Judge Broadbelt deals with that. Now, I haven't seen him. I don't know what he's like in relation to Judge Hammock. But Judge Broadbelt is going to wrestle with this idea that David Miscavige is sending an attorney down to say, we don't know that you're suing us. It's insane. And both Leah and Jane Doe 1, they've shared attorneys, they've shared process servers, they've done the same hard work. Their attorney, Carmen Scott, says she spent $10,000 now doing everything they can to, try to serve David Miscavige here and in Florida and everywhere else. So, at some point, somebody at LA Superior Court is going to have to make a decision. There was a judge in Florida that ruled, yes, he's evading service and he's a defendant. But it hasn't happened. And they've been suing this guy in LA court ever since Laura DiCrescenzo. They haven't been able to get him named a defendant. What is it about LA Superior Court? So I'm hoping that these judges, this week in Jane Doe 1's case and next week in Leah's case, that these judges will finally give us some kind of a decision on this maddening situation.
Big time. Well, definitely fingers crossed on this one, because yeah, enough is enough. Enough is enough. Let's stop playing around. This is just silly. And anyway, good stuff here. Okay, well, those were what we wanted to cover from last week. It's been an exciting time lately, and there's more to come. Speaking of, Tony, did you have any previews for us?
Well, the court cases. It's going to be a big week. On, cool. Like I said, Tuesday, we're going to find out if Jane Doe 1's judge will accept that David Miscavige has been served. Thursday, we're going to find, I'm sorry, wrong. Tuesday, we're going to find out if Leah has done enough to keep RTC in her lawsuit with the declarations from Mike Rinder and Claire Headley. Thursday, we're going to find out if Jane Doe 1 has done enough to convince Judge Broadbelt that David Miscavige is a defendant in her lawsuit. And in between, I got a fun little surprise, and I cannot wait for everyone to see it. I'm really excited about it. So make sure, sign up for free emails at tonyortega.substack.com. You will get my story. You're not just going to get a notice Tony's got a new story up. I email you the whole story ad-free to your inbox every morning at 7 a.m. So, and sometimes in the afternoon as well. So please come on by, sign up, and join the conversation.
Boom, there you go, guys. And of course, while you're at it, hit that subscribe button and the little bell so you get your notifications on my posts here on YouTube as well. See you guys next week. Thanks for coming around. Bye-bye.